is 5 data-driven changes you can make to turn your metrics from scary to celebration worthy. All right, so just a little bit about me. I'm Senior Digital Marketing Manager at Triblio. My background's in B2B digital marketing, demand gen, advertising, content, all of it. And I love personally memes, marketing ideas, and hitting my metrics. So just a little bit about Triblio as well. Triblio is a foundry company and is an ABM platform that enables sales and marketing teams to identify, reach, and engage target accounts across channels and prove account-based ROI. And so what we're going to be talking about today is the current state of affairs, key pieces of advice, and then 5 metric exercises you can use to improve your performance with examples so you can see how they work. And then some free resources at the end. All right, so the ideal scenario, of course, is sales and marketing after a good quarter, which might look something like this. It's a little awkward. They're not, they don't really speak the same language, but they have positive energy for each other after a good quarter. What might be happening here is you might have surpassed your targets for sales and marketing. There might be kudos and back pats for a job well done. And you might even be facing higher goals for next quarter now that you all have succeeded. But what is happening to a lot of people right now, especially, is sales and marketing teams are having bad quarters. They're, perhaps not anticipating economic conditions, had lofty goals that they just didn't reach recently. So sales and marketing after a bad quarter might look like this, which is not good. So what might be happening is you might have missed your target metrics for sales and marketing. There might be some disconnects between MQLs and SQLs. You might have a high volume of low quality leads, lower than expected conversion rates. You might have lost deals that completely blindsided you. Forecast was that you're going to get it and then you didn't. And there might be some finger pointing, hopefully not, but there might be. So what do you do next? How do you dig yourself out of this hole? How do you get alignment between sales and marketing? And how do you hit your metrics next quarter? And of course, the next quarter's already started. So first, deep breaths, because, you can't flounder your way to success. It just won't happen. So these are 4 things I think that people should keep in mind when they're thinking of trying to, sit down, look at their metrics critically and, make a game plan. So first of all, start from a place of curiosity rather than judgment, especially if you're looking at, someone else's performance or performance that isn't yours directly. You won't have productive conversations and strategies if you're kind of like spinning around looking for someone to blame. So asking questions like, well, why is this that way? And how do these metrics interact? Those are good places to start from to get progress. Next, I would say lean into metrics that matter. So this sounds very obvious at the outset, but what I mean by that is that I think as marketers, we all know some metrics that we track are either completely out of our control, which is, if you can't control it, then it's good information to have, but ultimately you can't pull your hair out over something you can't control, or vanity metrics, which even if it is somehow in your control, deep down, it doesn't get you revenue. So, you shouldn't spend too long on it. Next, I'd say let go of your assumptions. So you might assume like if this, then that for a lot of things with your metrics. I think this tactic is the most valuable thing we can be doing right now. But you need to let some of that go, especially if the data doesn't back that up, just because you have a gut feeling. And finally, prioritize your bandwidth. I think if you're anything like me as a marketer who, sits in a room with sales and connects with them and wants to commit to all of our ideas, you want to say yes to every idea that could help, but you have to remember to prioritize your and your team's bandwidth, because ultimately there's only so many things that you could do in a day and in a quarter. All right, so the first metric to check is the lost op postmortem. So I like to I like to call it that. Essentially, you're looking at opportunities that you lost, seeing whether you lost them at a higher rate than a historical average or a benchmark if you expected them to go up, if you lost them in earlier stages than typical and expected, or if sales says, the meetings aren't qualified, like they might have progressed, but we knew it wasn't qualified from the beginning, comments like that. So what you want to do is create a report of the loss reasons for opportunities for the quarter that you're referencing. So, if last quarter was bad for you, you look at last quarter and you compare it to the quarter before, so Q4 in this scenario, and the quarter a year before that, so that you have that same season represented. And so right here, you can see on the right side, I've just got like a sample, very basic report. You see the loss reasons might be choose competitor, lost contact with the prospect, or insufficient budget, and you can have many more reasons, however you choose to bucket them. But ultimately, you look for trends over time, you look for changes, and you can, compare percentages as well. So I put together just a little example of a chart of how you might see changes over time. So here we can see under lost reasons, not interested in the product category. So we see went from 40 to 60 to 80. It's a clear trend going up. So that is significant. That could point to targeting issues, product messaging issues. So really something to take a look at. Then here we can also see the bottom, insufficient budget went up. So, this is hypothetical data, but if this was last quarter, you wouldn't be so surprised because that's, economically something we know is going on right now. It can speak to those economic issues your stakeholders are facing. But it could also mean that you could, benefit from using signals that can help point you towards people that aren't affected by that right now, or are potentially less likely to be. So, that could be intent data, that could be company growth signals like funding rounds, headcount increases, anything pointing to positive growth for these target accounts could help to minimize that close loss reason. Okay, and then in example 2, you can see, so it's a similar set of data, it's presented the same way. And you can see here, chose competitor is going up. So what this could mean here is, your competitors are winning deals more against you. Maybe your positioning is really getting beaten up by your competitors right now. Maybe you need to build out more competitive resources for your sales team, or maybe you're not, doing enough marketing air cover and your competitors are just swooping out under your nose and picking up those pipeline ops. Then we have, also in this example, lost contact with prospect went up here. So 30 to 50 to 100. So you might want to take a look at your follow-up. How are you staying in touch with prospects while they're in your pipeline? Do you have a multi-threaded approach? You probably should. And how's your marketing air cover? Are these people being hit by your marketing messaging while they're in pipeline? And the next metric we have to look through is a target account gut check. So I would say to use this when sales says, marketing driven leads don't have intent, or you don't think you're breaking into in-market accounts. You think there's, green field that has intent and you're not getting there. So here I would say what you want to do is use intent data and pull a report of companies that viewed one or more of your competitors in the past quarter. And so you might use, G2 for that, or whatever intent data provider you like. And then cross-reference that list against your pipeline. Obviously you don't want to be stressing over, outside of target accounts. So you should check that they're in your target, in your TAM, but cross-reference that against your pipeline. How many of those in-market accounts did you break into? Of the rest, did you reach them with messaging, or were they completely missed? So here you can see just a quick representation of that. So the example target accounts showing intent is 100, target accounts converted is 20. And so that would be 20% of them converted. So a 20% conversion rate could be good, but, comparing it to the past, is it better? Is it worse? Did you try to engage with the other 80%, or did they fall through the cracks? So finding gaps here and then adjusting your targeting to make sure you find them, or your outreach and marketing strategy to make sure you reach them, is key ways that you can increase conversion rates among these high fit, high intent accounts. Basically, your low hanging fruit. They already have the intent. And if you don't get to the table, how can you expect to close the deal? All right. And then next we have metric check number 3, MQLs that never make it. So I would say to use this. This is a pain point I think a lot of marketers know. When you would want to use it is, let's say marketing metrics look good, but your sales metrics don't. So this is, if you have a ton of MQLs, but you don't have what is supposed to come from those MQLs, that's a big red flag. So if you have a big drop off in conversions from MQL to SQL or MQL to opportunity, or however you track it, you got to take a look at what's driving that, what those MQLs actually are, and familiarize yourself. So what you want to do for this one is to measure the MQLs, which I'm sure you're already doing, measure the conversion rates, and then look quarter against previous quarter, quarter against previous year, look for any drop-offs in conversions, and then also take a look at where all those MQLs are coming from, because they're not created equal. So you want to review, potentially a sample of your MQLs with your team. Really look at them. Are they actually qualified? If they weren't qualified from the outset, they're going to harm your conversion rate, because if they're not qualified, sales isn't going to, count them as converted. So then how are you nurturing them? So if you have a drop off in your conversion rate, check it, how that, nurture looks. Do you have nurture streams? Do you have retargeting ads? Do you have SDR outreach? Check that follow up, because you didn't drive those MQLs just to let them die and count towards that one metric. Then if they're not qualified, reconsider the targeting and the tactics that you're employing that are driving those MQLs. So, if that's content downloads, is that really what you want? So here we have an example, which I think people would be familiar with this. Marketing hits their 500 MQL goal, but the conversion rate is unusually low and sales only gets 50 meetings. Now, hopefully those exact numbers are not the case for anyone, but you get the gist. So that would be a high number of MQLs. And let's say in this example, they came from a content download offer, LinkedIn potentially. Low intent, low quality, like these could be the complaints that you're hearing. So here you should be looking at, are those actually the MQLs that you want? Do you feel like we could convert them, but we're not? So then obviously adjust that outreach and that nurture and really hammer them with messaging. Or, honestly, maybe it would make more sense to shift investment away from this source. If you're optimizing for something that's just not happening, like you're going after MQLs that just don't have the propensity to buy later, you could spend those dollars elsewhere. And then our next metric check 4, self-reported versus software reported attribution. So when you'd want to use this is, maybe your budget's shrinking, or you need to decide where you can trim fat within your paid programs and, your bandwidth, because it doesn't just cost money to run, ads and programs, but team bandwidth is also its own cost. Or you're asked to provide, to prove ROI for your paid programs. So you should always be ready to, but it's especially daunting when you're asked to prove it and you have to turn around and, get together all the data and see what really has standing within your programs. So what I would recommend to do for this, sort of attribution comparison is a deep dive on both your marketing attribution via software and self-reported fields on your forms. So hopefully that's something that you're tracking, but if it's not, I highly recommend adding it. You might hear, like, for example, Refine Labs is always talking about the benefit of that. And they've done plenty of studies on how it doesn't impact form fill, conversion rates, stuff like that. So highly recommend. And then keep in mind that some sources are by default more or less trackable than other sources. So my example here, Google has great attribution by design. They give themselves credit for everything. LinkedIn, not so much. You have thresholds you have to hit to even know if someone saw something. And sometimes it just feels a little invisible. So in this example, You just see our form on the right-hand side. Where did you hear about us? So highly recommend having that if you don't. Metrics via software attribution, so HubSpot potentially, might show Google as your top channel for conversion attribution, but then you look through your form self-attribution fields, you might have to organize the data, but once you do that, you might see other very significant channels. So LinkedIn, sometimes you see it mentioned when there was no trackable activity. So that's something, to not take with a grain of salt when someone tells you outright where they heard about you. G2 might be somewhere you're hearing people say they heard about you from. Gartner, the grids, or any other sources, many of which are completely, invisible to you unless otherwise stated. So by combining these two attribution types, the manual and the not so manual, you get a much fuller picture of actual buyer behavior rather than making sweeping decisions like, let's put all our money into SEO and paid search because software told you Google's killing it right now for you. Okay, and then our last metric. So this is pipeline velocity pivot, I like to call it. So I'd say you use this when your pipeline might be stagnated. You have deals languishing, they're not moving as quickly as they tend to. So you're, getting worried that revenue numbers are down, and you need to decide where to dedicate resources to improve that because you need that revenue. So what to do here, measure your pipeline velocity and then break it out by opportunity sources, because on its own, it only tells you revenue good, revenue bad. But once you break it out by sources, it gives you more information that you can contextualize and form a strategy around. So look at the ways in which your sources outperform and underperform each other, and then make goals and hypotheses about changes that you can make to improve those variables. So here in this example, I've just done some quick, hypothetical math on 3 sources of pipeline. And then you can see in this example, it's sort of something surprising. So here we have inbound, cold outreach, and referrals. And just based on the qualified opportunities alone, you would think referrals are just a niche, it's nice when you get it, but you don't have much of it, 30 opportunities. But when you look over at the pipeline velocity itself, it's higher. It's the most valuable source of pipeline. So that's one way in which you really want to drill down, because otherwise, just off the top of your head, you may not realize these things about your pipeline sources. So taking a look here, I've boxed certain variables I wanted to go over. Possible action items you might take if these were your metrics. So first of all, the referrals, like I just mentioned, you could try to induce a higher volume. You have a high ACV, low sales cycle length, high win rate. Everything's great. It's just not high volume. So you might set up a formal referral program if you don't already have one, or invest more heavily in customer marketing. Next, inbound. You have a lot of opportunities. Sales cycle length is not as bad as cold outreach. Win rate is pretty good, but the average contract value of 40 is the lowest of all 3. So you could take steps to increase that ACV, target more upstream accounts potentially, or upsell pipeline accounts, anything you can do to bring that up. And then lastly, cold outreach. So we see high volume, decent ACV, sales cycle length 65, and win rate 4. So the 2 things you can do here, I only called out one, but I'm just realizing another. But you want to improve that sales cycle length. So 65, anything you can do to get it down to closer to inbound or referral will help immensely. It'll increase that pipeline velocity by a lot. Also, of course, the win rate. So, any additional touches you can do or additional air cover you can add to, help to get to close could help. All right, so that was everything I had today. Thank you so much for watching. I have some free resources here if you like. A couple of them are very related to what I talked about today: pipeline velocity calculator, some metrics you can use to improve your programs, some great long form resources from Triblio. And then I just linked to, Triblio's account and me. So thank you so much for watching. Feel free to connect.